Chuck, it is a mystery here on this street with apartments lining both sides. It's just south of Sunset. You can see the iconic Guitar Center there behind me. Residents say yesterday there was a lot of police activity outside of this apartment building after a former LAUSD teacher was found dead inside of his home. Tonight, for the first time, the LAPD confirms homicide investigators are now on the case.
As the police investigated, they discovered Harry's secret hobby. He wrote hundreds of letters to inmates over the years, and on the surface, the letters were harmless. Mostly they were about the soap opera General Hospital, but buried between the lines of TV gossip were offers, personal invitations, promises of a place to stay and a hot meal, and in most cases, something more intimate. You see, Harry wasn't just interested in the show. He was cultivating relationships with soon-to-be ex-cons and inviting them to his home, but this time, he opened the door to the wrong man. The prison pen pal murder. On February 12, 2014, Dale Rouse went to check on his friend and tenant Harry Majors. Harry had a regular lunch date with one of his friends, but when he didn't show up, she grew concerned and called Dale to see if Harry was okay. Dale noticed Harry's car was still in the garage, which made him think Harry was likely home, but when no one answered the door, Dale decided to go inside. What he discovered was the kind of nightmare no one should ever have to face. The living room rug was splattered with blood, and a trail of it led up to the stairs. Dale followed the gruesome path, and when he reached the bathroom, he made a horrifying discovery. Harry, an 82-year-old retired school teacher, was dead. He was wearing only his underwear, with half of his body slumped in the bathtub, and the other half sprawled across the toilet seat. Dale immediately called the police. When investigators arrived, they pieced together a grim picture. Based on the blood trail, they determined Harry had been murdered downstairs and then dragged to the bathroom. The scene was anything but ordinary. Harry's body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head and bruises around his ankles, wrists, and neck, suggesting he'd been tied up at some point. This wasn't a simple robbery. This was personal. Not much is known about Harry's early life, but we do know that he grew up in the 1940s in a small farming community in Chatsworth, California. Harry was born with a disability where one arm was shorter than the other, but he never let that hold him back. As he grew older, he became estranged from his family after coming out as gay. Despite this, Harry built a new family of lifelong friends who meant the world to him. Harry's true passion was teaching. He spent years as an English teacher at Hollywood High School, where he was known for being tough but fair with his students. To his friends, he was warm, loving, and deeply loyal. The day after Harry's body was discovered, detectives spoke with his next-door neighbor, Luz. She told them she hadn't noticed anything unusual on the day Harry was found, but 2 days earlier, on February 10th, she had heard something strange. Luz shared a wall with Harry's apartment, and that day she heard a loud thud. Concerned that her elderly neighbor might have fallen, she went to check on him. She knocked on his door and called out, asking if he was okay, but instead of Harry's voice, she heard an unknown woman yell back, "Harry's not home." Luz had given the police their first real clue. With the help of Dale Rouse, Harry's landlord and friend, they went through Harry's phone book and called every woman listed. Each one denied meeting Harry that day, and they all had solid alibis. The investigation seemed to hit a dead end until Harry's estate lawyer Steve Schultz contacted the police. He revealed something that shifted their entire focus. Although Dale was Harry's landlord, it turned out Harry had actually sold the apartment complex to Dale 5 years earlier. Harry was a secret millionaire, having made lucrative investments in Los Angeles real estate. Schultz also told investigators that Dale could potentially benefit from Harry's death. But Dale cooperated fully with police, explaining their complicated financial arrangement. He was still paying off the building to Harry in monthly installments, and Harry's rent payments went towards that debt. Now that Harry was dead, Dale would still have to pay off that debt, but to Harry's chosen charity, Plan B, which inherited most of his estate. The lawyer confirmed Dale's story, and the police were back to square one. On the 5th day of the investigation, Harry's autopsy results came in. He had died from strangulation with a belt or strap, as well as blunt force trauma to the head. The autopsy also confirmed that Harry had been killed on February 10th, the same day that Luz heard the loud thud and the mysterious woman's voice. Detectives revisited Luz, asking if she remembered anything else unusual from that day. She didn't, but she mentioned her sister Felix, who cleaned her apartment 3 times a week, might have seen something. When questioned, Felix recalled seeing two unknown men arguing outside of Harry's door on February 5th. This new lead prompted the police to review security footage from the apartment parking garage. The footage showed Harry with two unidentified men in the days leading up to his murder. But after February 5th, only one of those men was seen with Harry. The day after Harry's funeral on February 16th, his estate lawyer was cleaning out his apartment when he made a shocking discovery: stacks of letters from prisoners across the country. Many of these letters were from inmates Harry had met through a General Hospital newsletter. General Hospital is the longest-running soap opera in American history. While some letters were innocent, the majority were sexually explicit, with graphic photos and messages. A recurring theme in the letters was Harry inviting these men to live with him after their release in exchange for sex. Harry's lawyer immediately told the detectives. Police zeroed in on one ex-con in particular, James DeRocco. In a series of letters, James wrote that he was getting out of prison in January and planned to visit Harry as soon as he was released. James, a career criminal from Nevada, had been in and out of prison for most of his life. He and Harry had been pen pals for 20 years, and whenever James wasn't incarcerated, he would stay with Harry. Their arrangement was clear. In exchange for sex, Harry provided James with money, gifts, and a place to stay. When detectives questioned James, he explained that Harry often helped ex-cons by giving them money, helping them find jobs, and offering them a place to stay as they re-entered society. But there was always an expectation of sex. James described his relationship with Harry as a friends with benefits situation. He also revealed that shortly after his release, Harry had invited another ex-con, Scott Porter, to stay with them. Harry even paid for Scott to fly in from New York. At first, James and Scott got along, but tensions quickly rose. Scott became increasingly moody and accused James of following him. On February 5th, James saw Scott stealing from Harry while he was away. The two got into a heated argument that turned physical. Scott put James in a headlock and threatened, "I'm a murderer. Don't you know I can kill you?" The next day, James warned Harry about Scott's dangerous behavior, but Harry dismissed his concerns. James left that same day, asking Harry to take him to the bus station. His alibi for February 10th was confirmed by his probation officer. Investigators turned their attention to Scott Porter. They found the letter Scott wrote to Harry and contacted Marcy Correctional Facility in New York, where Scott had been incarcerated. However, they were told there was no inmate by that name. Digging deeper, they discovered Scott had used multiple aliases, including Scott Porter. His real name was Scott Kratlian, and he had served 25 years for murder. Back in 1992, a 19-year-old Scott brutally killed 66-year-old Salvatore Caggiano. The details of Salvatore's murder were eerily similar to Harry's case. Like Harry, Salvatore was gay and had been tortured and strangled to death with a belt. His body was also discovered face down and naked in the bathtub. But the weirdest similarity was that just like Harry, a female neighbor heard an unknown woman's voice at the time of the murder, screaming, "Help, someone killed my grandpa." Scott had been released on parole in November 2013, and like many of Harry's pen pals, he had connected with Harry through the General Hospital pen pal network. Despite his unassuming appearance and his love for soap operas, Scott was far from a reformed prisoner seeking a second chance. He was dangerous. During his time in prison, the New York Parole Board had been adamant about making sure that Scott would never be released. His disciplinary record was horrible, and he was constantly getting into trouble. His conditional early release had been delayed for over 4 years due to his repeated misconduct. Yet somehow, Scott managed to secure release through a non-conditional parole program, one that didn't require state approval. Just a year before his release, the parole board had declared that his crime was so heinous that letting him go would undermine respect for the law. But despite their objections, Scott walked free. Scott's parole officer told police she hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks, and he didn't have permission to leave New York. Scott was officially on the run. The Hollywood PD issued a bolo for Scott, using his parole violation as grounds to bring him in. Meanwhile, detectives tracked Harry's missing credit cards and found charges starting on February 10th at various locations in Hollywood. One charge was at 7-Eleven, and security footage confirmed Scott was the one using the card. The video also revealed the last piece of the puzzle. Scott's voice was unusually high-pitched.
I bought sodas from you. You get treated like that?
There was no woman in that apartment. It was Scott. At some point, Scott realized the police were closing in on him because on February 18th, he checked himself into a mental health clinic in Pasadena, California. He told the staff he wanted to end his life and confessed he was wanted by the police. The clinic immediately contacted authorities and police rushed to the scene to arrest him. For some strange reason, Scott believed that checking into a mental health clinic would stop him from getting arrested, but he was very wrong. When police took Scott into custody, they confiscated all of his belongings. Upon inspecting his shoes, they discovered drops of blood and sent them for DNA analysis. While waiting for the results, detectives questioned Scott. He admitted he did stay with Harry, and after a fight with James DeRocco, Harry had told him to leave February 5th. Scott went to Los Angeles and tried to stay with another elderly pen pal on February 9th. This pen pal had no idea Scott was in California, and so when he knocked on her door, she was horrified. He asked to stay with her and she told him no. The next day, Scott went back to Harry's apartment to ask for money. He said Harry was angry, and the two got into what Scott called a quote, girls fight. He claimed he fell into the ground, Harry bit his finger, and his clothes got dirty. Scott said he went back inside, changed his clothes, and left. He insisted that Harry was still alive when he walked out. During the interrogation, the detective showed Scott security footage from a 7-Eleven where he had used Harry's credit card. Scott confirmed it was him, but became invasive when they asked him how he got the credit cards. Scott claimed he didn't remember. Thanks to his parole violation, police were able to hold Scott while they waited for the DNA results. 2 weeks later, the results came back. The blood on Scott's shoes was a match for Harry Major. In March 2014, Scott pleaded not guilty during his hearing, but in October 2015, he was found guilty of Harry's murder. That November, he was sentenced to 56 years to life in prison.